Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the D-Shift podcast. And as always, I have a expert guest who's here to talk to us about something that I don't think that we've really taken a close enough look at, or really much of a look at on this podcast. So I'm really excited to bring her in. So I'd like to introduce you to Nellie Harden. She is a mother with 4 daughters. She is a trauma survivor. She's a past worth chaser, which we definitely have to find out about that one. But more importantly, she's an author, a speaker, and a coach. And she focuses on family life and leadership. So Nellie, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to have a conversation about communication. I think that's fantastic. And particularly in looking at your website, one of your areas of focus is helping teenagers and particularly teenage girls with staying strongly connected to their family, which I think is something that's tough for a lot of teenagers, but can it be even more challenging when you're going through a divorce? So we're definitely going to get into that. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about you and why this particular area of focus.
You know what? It really is just a conglomeration, all of the snowballs rolled here, if you will, from every layer of my life. And so I was a young woman that didn't have this, great foundation of worth and esteem and confidence built in me before I left home, which then turned me into that worth chaser, which we can get more into in a minute. But, it's just about everything I was chasing was, oh, am I good enough? Am I good enough? Do you see me? Do you hear me? Do you love me? Do I belong here? Right? Do I have any sort of purpose? And so it was all of this chasing in order to get just a sparkle, a glimmer of anything worth that I felt worthy for. But then just like any sparkle, it fades really, really quickly. And then you're off chasing the next thing. So when I left home at 17, I graduated early and left home. I found myself in this state of constantly chasing my worth, and that can lead down some accidental nice paths, but most of the time it's going to lead down some dangerous or detrimental paths. And I certainly did find myself there, which led to some of the traumas that I endured, especially in early college years, early college months, even weeks, and that have taken decades to then heal from. So I was the young woman without this. I went through the trauma because of it. And then I was a woman that had to build this in my adult years, which is much harder, by the way, not impossible, but much harder when we have a fully formed brain, especially post 25 years of age, right? We have a fully formed brain after that. And it's like chiseling away hardened cement to reform something underneath versus forming it when the brain is still forming and malleable and formidable, right? They call it the formidable years for a reason. And so I've been in all those stages myself. And then I was gifted with this responsibility of raising. I had 4 daughters within 4 years. And I was like, wow, that is a lot of young ladies. And we almost lost my husband in there. We went through infertility before that. There's just been so many things that have led me toward helping young women in their adolescent years and the people that are leading and raising them, be it their parents, their families, teachers, youth leaders, coaches, etc. Everyone that is really focused in on helping build and be an architect of the beginning of these young women's lives. And so that is really how I got to be where I am today and nestled in just because I was one, I am one, and I'm raising them. So that's where I am.
Well, you know what? And I so appreciate what you're saying because for many years, I was a behavior consultant for school districts. And, quite often the young men, especially teenagers, were acting out in a very distinct way where they were, more outwardly acting, whereas young girls were more internalizing. Now, that's very stereotypical. So I'm not saying please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that's the way all boys and girls are different. No, there's a lot of things they all do the same. But that sense of self-worth is something that's really hard for
Mm.
a lot of girls, even when they come from homes where there isn't abuse, and where there are family or neglect, or that the kids aren't cherished and loved. It can still be, self-worth can still be a really tough thing for girls and for women.
Absolutely 100%. And we're just wired differently. I mean, you're talking, yes, every person is very different that ever has been and is and will be. But there are generalizations, especially when it comes to brain anatomy and functionality between young men and young women. And the way that many young women, the average, if you will, which, I always say there is no such thing as normal, right? Normal is just the average of all of us abnormal people. But, that average that's in there, we tend to think about several different things at once, right? Whereas young men and men tend to think of one thing at a time. I work closely with a gentleman, a pastor at the church I am a youth leader at, and we were just talking the other day. He's like, "Nope, that box is closed. I'm not thinking about that." I was like, "Well, all of my boxes are open all the time in my head." And we tend to get overwhelmed. But in doing that, we think about so many different things at the same time, which then is like, am I worthy? Am I being seen? When I walk into a room, I have all of these thoughts. And, talking with my husband the other day, he's like, you're overthinking this. But then at the same time, what I thought could happen did happen like 5 minutes later. And I was like, and there we go. And I was prepared because I had thought about it beforehand, right? And so we work differently, but to your point, young women and women in general tend to lag behind in the assuredness and understanding and knowing of that worth that we have.
Yeah, yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about, because I know communication sometime between, and I know that's one of your areas of
Yeah.
expertise is really communication. So what happens in those teenage years that all of a sudden kids become um less willing to listen to mom and dad? That old saying where my mom and dad were really intelligent and they were wonderful and almost magical when they're little, and then when you get to be a teen, they're just idiots. And then and then when you get to be in your 20s and 30s, you start to understand them again and where they
Yeah.
were coming from. I mean, I know, but can you talk a little bit about why you think that comes about, and what can parents actually do about it?
Well, so childhood is really broken up into several parts, but two major parts. And there's the build for you part, which is the first part, right? Where you are literally spoon feeding them life. This is what you will eat. This is what you will wear. This is who your friends are. This is who you will, go to school, etc. All the things. And then there's this shift. I call it the great transition that happens different for everybody, but it's generally somewhere between 9 and 13-ish. And that's where we switch over to the building life with you phase. So as a parent, you need to be prepared for that because it can slap you sideways really hard if you are not expecting it. But when you're doing that, you're coming alongside them, not as a friend, right? I am friends with my daughters, but not first, right? I
Right.
am a mentor, a guide, a navigator first, a parent first, and then a friend second. And so, but you come alongside them and you start asking a lot more questions and getting their input on a lot more things. And you have to become an observer as a parent and really an investigator too, in order to see what's going on in their life because they're starting to live a life independent of what's just happening at home, right? My four daughters now are between 15 and 19 years old. There's a lot of life that they live that is not right here under my roof. And so I need to ask a lot of questions to see what they're being exposed to, what challenges they're facing, etc. And one of the tools that I use for that is weekly one-on-one time with each of our girls. My husband has it and I have it. And so 2 nights a week, we have, I go to one girl's room, my husband goes to the other, and then, a couple days later, we have the other two. And so every week, my girls know that mom or dad, depending on whose week it is going to have one-on-one time with me. And during that time, not to say it doesn't happen other times, but there's something much more magical and deep about one-on-one time, especially when it's in their space of their bedroom. And, you're sitting on the floor, maybe sitting on the bed, you're watching them play a game that they have, you're asking them about school, you're telling them also about your life. And that's a big difference that happens between first part of childhood and second part of childhood. You are being a lot more vulnerable with them about sharing you as well. And when you do that, it breaks down walls. And when you can say, hey, one of my daughter's names is Trinity, right? When I can say, hey, Trinity, I walked into the office yesterday and I don't know, I'm having this challenge. What do you think about that? What does that tell them? It means they value my opinion. What I have to say matters, right? She's trusting me and all of these things. And when you can build those strands of trust going both ways, then you're building that bond in the second part of childhood before you're releasing them out into, well, not even releasing, launching them out into the world. So those are just some differences that happen between first and second part of childhood.
I love that. And I want to follow up on something you were just talking about. When you're talking about being vulnerable and sharing, we're because a lot of people listening to this are probably going through a divorce process. Well, not
Yeah.
probably, they are going through a divorce process. So I always caution parents, don't talk about a lot of deeply personal things around the divorce with your kids. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts on that? Because and I'll just tell you why I do it,
Yeah.
because typically I don't want mom or dad talking bad about the other parent and making it sound like this is all their fault, and just unloading all of their emotional baggage on their kids. What are your thoughts on, like, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate to share with teens around family situations? And maybe it's not divorce, maybe it's
Yeah.
something else that's going on in the family.
So I have not been through a divorce, but I am going through something that would equate to what you're talking about with my in-laws. And so there was a massive divide, an inconsolable difference, if you will. But we still, and that was over 10 years ago now, and we had to reconcile to the appropriate levels. And I know when I was going through that with my in-laws, my husband was going through it as well. We did not have those discussions about what was happening, or we were over FaceTime doing some of the discussions with them. We did not do that around the kids either.
Right.
And here's the thing, I want my children to be able to have their relationship with their grandparents from their perspective without the tarnishing of our junk and garbage and everything that was going on. And I think that's really important. My dad died when I was super young. I was only 1.5, and there was a lot of friction between my dad's parents and my mom. He was in a coma for 9 months. There was suing happening and all these things, but my mom still grinned and bared it and took me over there to see my grandparents because she didn't want me to not have a relationship with my grandparents, right? And so that is the same thing here. I think there is certain things, especially in a divorce, that just need to happen between mom and dad. I don't think the kids need to be in on every single detail because they're not involved in every single detail or relate to it, and especially age appropriateness. And you want everybody to have as healthy as possible relationship with their parent.
Right.
And if something that you're going through would alter that, but not be effective toward their safety, right? And their concern, then there's really no need to bring it up.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that you can't say that you're hurting or say and be vulnerable, and you can be open and this is really hard, right? I'm having a hard day, and I know your dad is probably having a hard day too, or what have you, like that. It doesn't mean you can't be yourself, but you just need to pick and choose exactly what parts you're going to share. And I heard someone say not too long ago, I want to be as open and honest with you as possible. It was a mother talking to a child, but she said some things are just for the marriage.
Right.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And I, I understand that not all families have the same perspective on that. But here's the thing, I always say you wouldn't tell kids the intimate details of your relationship if it was going really well. You don't talk to your
Right.
kids about your sex life. So why would
Sure.
you talk about the breakup of their like there are some things that people keep private from
Right.
children. So Nate, let's talk about what makes a good conversation from a parent who's maybe their child, whether they're going through a divorce or not, and particularly if they got a young lady, a young girl in the family. What are some of the things that work well, and maybe what are some of the things that just don't even try these because they are not going to be effective?
Okay, number one, don't try it. Power struggle. Do not even try it. You want to look at your family, and no matter spread across one household or two or more, you want to look at your family as a team, all working together for the betterment of the future. And so when you're looking at that, you don't want to have power struggles and, oh, I'm doing this, or I'm buying you this, or, come over here, those kind of power struggles. And you don't want to have them with your child either. You don't want to be the parent up on the, Mount Olympus throne or what have you, and they're just the minions down below. You want to come together. Yes, you are the team leader. Yes, you are the parent. And like I said earlier, the navigator, the mentor, the teacher, etc. But you are a team working toward the betterment of your family's future. So, number one, do not have a power struggle. And if you start sensing a power struggle, because let's face it, teenagers are kind of wired for that, right? Because their frontal lobe is still very much being hooked up, if you will. It's under construction brain time for them. And so when they see something, they're like, oh, I got to be all in on that, right? And so they go all in on the power struggle, and you can just back off because it takes two to play tug of war. And if one's just playing it, they're going to fall on their backside. So just sit down. I always say, drop the rope, pull up a chair. Just drop the rope, pull up
I
a
love
chair.
that. Great. That's a great mental image to keep in your mind as a parent, finding
Yes.
yourself going over the brink on that one. Yeah.
Yes. So, and pull up a chair, just be quiet. And then you can just start saying things nicely and calmly. So, the number one thing you want to do in a conversation, and I call them courageous conversations, and anyone that's going through a struggle is going to have many of these, including divorce. So, these courageous conversations, you have to be calm. There is nothing that can happen well, especially when involving a teenager, when they are working from their amygdala and the back of their brain and they're in fight or flight and freeze mode. And they're like I said, all in, right? You have to be calm. So what they have of their frontal lobe, which is reason and decision and forethought, can work. And so you want to use that. So be calm. And then the second thing you want to do is what I was mentioning earlier, be curious. If they are having some questionable or doing some questionable things, having some questionable decisions lately, maybe grades are slipping, promiscuity is something that happens a lot of times in these situations, or going off and making poor health decisions, or even self-harm, all these things. Ask the questions. One of the things we often talk about in our house and in my practice is I only know the outside of you. The outside world only knows the outside of you, because in you and I and in our children's heads, it goes from thought to feeling to decision to action and then reaction. But all of us on the outside of each other, we only see the actions, right? The words and
Right.
actions, and have a reaction. There's a whole world happening inside there before an action happens. And that's what we need to be curious about and ask the questions about. What led here, right? What led you here? What decision did you make to lead you here? Did you think that was a good decision? Can you tell me why you thought that was a good decision? What were you feeling? What were you thinking, right? Not in a, what were you thinking, right? But in a
Right.
serious, kind and inquisitive, I'm really curious what you were thinking here because I want to help you, right? I'm working together with you for the betterment of our future. And then you want to, depending on what they're saying, you want to connect with something of them that they're saying. So maybe it all really comes down to those pillars of worth, right? I don't feel seen. I don't feel heard. I don't feel loved. I don't feel like I belong somewhere, and I don't feel like I have a purpose. I have yet to, and I've been doing this a long time. I have yet to meet an adolescent that is going through a challenge, or a woman of any age really going through a challenge that it really doesn't melt down to one or more of those five right there. And when you can get down to the root of that and then help them feel seen, heard, loved, belong, and purpose, but it's different for everybody. How you feel seen is different than I feel seen, right?
Sure.
And that's why these one-on-one times and getting to know your child, even through crisis, even through difficulty and being vulnerable, is so important to know them and how they feel their worth and express their worth and so receive their worth. And so that's really important to connect with them. Maybe you have a story that you can connect with them about something that happened in your life too, not to take away from what they're saying, but just so they know she gets it, right? She gets it. I'm not sitting alone on an island right now. She really does get it. And then you want to cultivate and have a back and forth and conversation about it. And lastly, always leave with clarity. If you leave a courageous conversation without clarity, you're destined to have it next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so repeat it next Tuesday. So you have to have clarity, which looks like action steps to go forward, not just, I'll try to be nicer. I'll try to make better decisions. Okay, well, what boundaries are you putting up in order to protect yourself in guardrails, right?
Right.
What yes or no check the box actions can you do in order to make better decisions, be nicer, be kinder to your siblings, etc. next time and build those
Yeah.
relationships. So that would be a sequence that I would go through for sure.
I love that. I love that. And I always, when I was doing behavior contracts a lot in school districts, I would always tell kids, if I took a snapshot of you doing what you said you'd be doing, what would I be seeing? And then that's where we would start because you're right. And even as adults, those are five important C's that we need to be thinking of when we're having conversations. Because this whole treat everybody with dignity and respect, that's useless. It's
Yes.
absolutely worthless. I'll be nice. I'll be nicer to my brother or sister. What does that even mean? So
Yeah.
I totally respect what you're saying. I cannot believe how fast these conversations go. Nellie, of all the things we talked about, and you have shared just some phenomenal resources. Thank you. What do you think is the most important piece that you want parents or moms thinking of when they're dealing with teens or daughters going at any for any challenge or just living with them day to day in the house?
Yeah. Well, I would say just focusing on worth because worth, esteem, and confidence, it's like a three-tiered foundation to have built within the what I call the 65-70. That's how many days are in 18 years, right? But that worth piece, you cannot have esteem, value, and appreciation if you don't find something worthy, and you can't believe in something that you don't value and appreciate or find worthy. So worth is really the basis there, and it has to be on a level ground of security. Security can be very rocked, especially in a divorce situation and time that's going on. So do what you can in order to provide security and build worth in them. But here's the thing that your teenager needs to know, and you need to know, anyone and everyone that's listening to this, is you do not have to seek your worth. You are already worthy. And this is how you logistically, I got so tired of people telling me, oh, lean into your worth. And I was like, I don't know. How do I build that? I have no idea what it is. Oh, here are the five things, the five components of that. So really ask yourself, how is it that I feel seen? When was the last time I truly did feel seen, right? And heard and loved and belong and have purpose, right? And then go off and follow some of those paths. But if I had to narrow it down to one sentence, it would be, you do not have to chase your worth. You are already worthy. Now go live it.
What a wonderful way to wrap this up. And that is a really good reminder for everybody. And I'm going to say that, for literally for anybody going through a divorce, because you do kind of, when you walk out the other side, you're like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing this. And thank you for providing some really concrete steps that the parents can take to build up those relationships with their teens, even in tough times. So, Nellie, I want to thank you. I do want to ask you, though, if people want to find out more about what you do or connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way is go to my website, nellieharden.com. I would love to meet you in your inbox. I have a new publication that comes out every single week. I would love to be able to send that to you and get to know you. And then Instagram and Facebook, all the things, but you can find it all through my website, nellieharden.com.
Great. And I will make sure that information gets in the show notes as well. Nellie, thank you so much for your time here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode of The D Shift. And don't forget to tune in again next week. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.